Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, we join hands in a communal prayer that Tyree Wilson does not end up a Detroit Lion. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Glad to have you along for the ride again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making us your first listen every day on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Great to be back with you and kicking off another episode here today with big things to discuss because we're talking about a big man. Tyree Wilson will hear his name called coming up tonight in the first round of the NFL draft. He'll join the likes of Walt Schlinkman, Ted Watts, Gabe Rivera, Michael Crabtree, Patrick Mahomes, Jordan Brooks, Red Raider first rounders over the years. And I mentioned one of those, Chris, Dave Parks, the top overall pick of the NFL draft once upon a time. Tyree Wilson, damn close to that kind of positioning. And who's to say what could happen, I suppose, by the time it all goes down this evening. But you've seen like number 2, number 3. The dude has just been climbing the charts and can't wait to hear his name called whenever it is tonight, man. Looking forward to this.
He's been one of the most talked about, I think, guys really in the last week. And I think that it's kind of been hard for me to watch in some ways because I think that the more he's talked about positively, I think more people have tried to tear him down and kind of like go, what are we doing here? This guy's not Will Anderson at Alabama. I mean, this guy goes to Texas Tech. I mean, I've done a couple of different radio interviews where people have questioned Tyree Wilson to me, and I'm like, of all the things that in my life right now, like questioning Tyree Wilson is just not anywhere on the list. Like, again, I saw it up close, and again, I'm biased. Most people they didn't see what I saw up close, but he is, and I think as we look at tonight, in the draft. I think that he's going to be, there's going to be some hype there, but I think that, I've bought into more of that he's going to go higher in this draft than lower, if that makes sense. So in other words, I feel like he's more likely to go number 2 than he is number 12. Okay. Right. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying here, but there's some thought too that there could be a slide here, so depending on who you listen to, just because of his injury history. And this is much like, do you like mint chocolate chip or do you like Rocky Road? Well, they're both good. They're both refreshing. Bluebell makes them both. They're both, you could even put them together and it'd be great, but some people like one over the other. And so if you happen to like, Rocky Road better than mint chocolate chip, then you may like Will Anderson more than Tyree Wilson. Well, and so if you're going to pick Rocky Road early, and then maybe Wilson does slip a bit just because quarterbacks fit in, and then there's teams that don't necessarily need an edge guy or defensive lineman. So there's some wiggle room here. I just don't. I think I don't know if I'm buying into the Houston pick at number 2 just yet. But I think that's a very strong possibility. They could be off the radar and take a quarterback. They could, in fact, take Will Anderson from Alabama. I mean, I'm just not real sure. But I do think there's a legit interest in Tyree Wilson from D'Amico Ryans. I think they've kind of let people know that. And so you just have to be careful because everybody that's moving their mouth for an organization this time of the year before the draft, they're all lying. I don't believe hardly any of them.
It's all intentional for some reason.
You're just not real sure. Exactly. You're just not real sure, because like C.J. Stroud from Bama, the quarterback, from Ohio State, he's supposedly falling down the draft board. Well, like, what do you mean? The draft didn't even started yet. What do you mean he's sliding? Is this a team or teams purposely leaking out negative info because they want him to drop?
Exactly.
They want to take him. I mean, so you just DTA, man. Don't trust anybody.
Okay, man. I'm glad you went with the A at the end. I didn't know where we were going with that. Yeah, is Stroud like already in the green room waiting? Like he's sliding. He's going Aaron Rodgers. Man, I've really been liking I'm thinking, of course, just as a Tech fan and wanting to see Tech players wind up in good situations. When you're talking about a high draft pick, typically you're talking about, yeesh, what are you walking into? What's surrounding you? And of course, when you're talking about the Houston Texans, you're talking, yeesh, the majority of the time. But I like DeMeco Ryans, but in general, him being what he is as a football mind, defensively oriented, kind of been thinking, man, that may be all right for a guy like Tyree Wilson to step into something like that. But it's hard to balance those things, Chris. Obviously, if you're going to be a high pick, you're typically going to be chosen by a team that wants you to come help rise their tide, so to speak. So I don't know if you can have your cake and eat it too, but I've been a little bit interested, even though I'm not a Texans fan by any stretch, in that pairing. Have you seen any situation just kind of maybe among that top 10 or some of where he's been projected that you feel like this could be exciting because Seattle's kind of up in that range as well? Yeah. Anybody standing out to you like that?
That's what I was going to say. I think Seattle at 5 has also been a popular, mocked up situation. And here's the one thing you just simply can't predict. Does anybody trade up or back? And then it reshuffles the deck because I think Houston, they could, if they play their cards right, they could maybe potentially trade back a bit and still get Tyree Wilson and pick up some additional picks or something. I mean, if somebody wants to jump up to number 2 to take Stroud or Will Levis, the quarterback from Kentucky. I mean, quarterbacks usually kind of move this thing one way or the other. I think that the Texas running back is also worth mentioning here because I think that I've seen him picked anywhere from like 8 to like 26 with Dallas or maybe even after that. And you just don't know. But if somebody jumps up there like Philly and says, hey, man, we're going to take him, it just can kind of change the order and all things like that. But I think, Houston and Seattle, both picking in the top 5, I believe, or at least now they have picks in the top 5. I think they've been, but sometimes with these mocks, the way I was always taught, a mock draft is put together because you have a situation with scouts giving their input to outlets. And this is how I would do it. But then what happens is, and this is why you get people being shocked at times, whether it's an NBA, MLB, or NFL draft, because then you get the decision makers, which are different than the folks that are inputting on a mock draft or talking to somebody at The Athletic or talking to somebody at the Dallas Morning News. Hopefully you're following what I'm saying here. Yeah. Because, the scouts in the organization, all they do is give their input. They tell you this dude's good, this dude sucks, this dude's got a crazy girlfriend, this guy's got a drug problem, whatever. And then they have their opinions on this guy's going to be a player and this guy's not, whatever. But they're not the ones making the choice. Well, when you get on the clock, tonight, you have the owner, you have the general manager, the team president. They are the ones that ultimately are going to break the ties, and they're going to make the choice. And that can be very different than what the mock draft stuff that we've all seen. And so all it takes is somebody to kind of go way out of order, and they could just reshuffle the thing. And so you're just not real sure. It's just you have to be real careful about like taking the mock draft consensus as the Bible. Because it could be a bit different than that when the rubber meets the road and all that. But do I think Tyree's going in the top 10? Absolutely. Do I think it may go number 2 as much as, everybody has suggested? It almost has been suggested too much for me to ultimately believe it. But we shall see.
Yeah, and I totally get what you're saying about how you discuss so much the positives that it just leads someone to want to come on you. Because it's kind of like if anybody ever compliments our show, I'm like, no, don't even mention us. Don't even mention us. I don't want to get attacked by somebody else who doesn't feel the same way. I can't wait to find out who this is going to be. And all I can say among those top 10, you keep your hands off of him, Detroit. You stay away from Tyree Wilson, Detroit. Take old Mustard Fingers from Austin. He'd be great for you guys. I can't believe I didn't get a little more love for my Walt Schlinkman shout out either. You check any other podcast in the Texas Tech realm, all our podcast homies out there, you find another Walt Schlinkman shout out on any one of those, you let me know because I don't think it exists. And before we're done, just the general question we like to ask this time of year, who the hell is Mel Kiper anyway? Right? So we want to keep that on our minds also. Shout out to
the clips. Yeah, the clips of the Indianapolis Colts GM back in the day. He straight up was like, Kiper's an old Baltimore fan. He's mad because we moved this thing to Indy. He'll get to your grandmother. He'll get to your wife. He'll get to, because I got my wife questioning what I'm doing here because she heard Mel say it. It's so good, man. It's just total meltdown.
Love to have a little of that circus on TV coming up tonight. We don't get that so much anymore, but once upon a time we did.
It was so good. And Kiper's like, it's just very clear the Indianapolis Colts just don't know what they're doing. They don't understand how the draft really works. And for
many years he was backed up. I guess
I would say that Kiper ended up with score.
Who the hell is Bill Tobin anyway? Join us on the other side tomorrow as we will digest wherever Tyree is chosen, and also we'll get to the list of next most draftable Red Raiders on tomorrow's show. But wish you the best to Tyree Wilson in a big spot for him. Is Coach McGuire going to be in attendance? Do you have any idea?
Yes. Believe the contingent, at least last I heard, was Coach McGuire, James Blanchard, and Antonio Huffman will be in Kansas City. Kind of a lot of Texas Tech there in Kansas City because you have somebody that's going to go as high as Tyree. We think he'll go. And then obviously when you're downtown Kansas City, they just won the Super Bowl, and there's some dude that plays quarterback for the Chiefs that knows Joey McGuire and all that stuff. So I think that's kind of fun.
Yeah, what's his name? Rich Gannon, or was it Trent? I can't remember. These Chiefs quarterbacks just roll through. So
Dilfer, yeah, no. Joe Montana once played for the old
right.
The Chiefs.
Took them to an AFC Championship game.
Patrick Mahomes, I think, would be front and center, and that's just lines up perfectly that you've got a Red Raider going really high in this thing.
And your last, Chris had to remind me of this prior to the show. Your last first round pick, the great Jordan Brooks, another defensive player. Man, this is Defender U here in Lubbock, Texas. So he'll join some elite company whenever he does hear his name called tonight. Looking forward to it, and we'll discuss it on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Texas Tech. As for dead ahead on today's episode, we're sticking with college football, but something everybody's jazzed up to discuss, right? Any day of the week, rules. We put on our Rule Meister glasses and get into it next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by Built Bar. And if you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar, don't want all the calories, I got what you need, buddy. That's Built Bar or Built Puff. What makes them so good? For starters, covered in 100% real dark chocolate. Tastes so great, you're not going to think they're good for you. Unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream. Not sure how they do it, but they maintain amazing macros while tasting like a candy bar. What's even better, they're healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait to get a box. You can always go to Built.com to get your specialty flavors. But also right now, you can walk into your local Walmart or Sam's Club and pick up a 4-bar box if you're at Walmart. Or if you hit Sam's Club, 13-bar box with hit flavors, brownie batter puff, or the churro puff. You can thank me later after you try your first Built Bar. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't so far so you never miss an episode. Love being your first listen every day right out the gate. And hope for your second listen, you still got time to dial up Locked On's NFL Mock Draft Special. Bigger, better than ever. You can follow along with every team's first pick in a 6-episode ultimate mock draft experience like only Locked On can deliver. All episodes available to you right now on Locked On NFL Draft. That's on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Chris, we're in the college football realm once again, and actually a call back to something we discussed several weeks ago. We had some college football rule proposals to adjust some things, change some things here or there. Some seemed like more along the lines of absurdity. Some seemed a little bit more practical. And obviously a wide range of opinions as to how college football fans are going to feel about some of these things. But one thing that did come to pass that obviously really will impact the way a game feels, and particularly the way that, the final few minutes in a half or in a game overall could feel: first down clock protocol. One of the things unique to college football for a long time, I guess my entire life, as far as I know, is a stopped clock after a first down. That's not the way it is in the National Football League, but that is not the way it will be any longer. The clock will keep moving. Seems maybe to some like a relatively minor adjustment, Chris, but I really do think this will, in some cases, fairly dramatically change the way that a game could play out, particularly in the closing minutes.
I agree, and so we're clear here. This is going to be the way it goes this fall. Like, this is immediate. They have changed this rule, and you mentioned your lifetime and my lifetime. I mean, since 1968, this is how this has gone. First downs, the clock stops, so they reset the chains, and then once they set the ball and all that, but it changes the dynamic a bit. And people have been curious as to why. I think overall, college has done some things to try to NFL eyes their product a bit and shorten games. And the reason is because you're trying to fit them in these TV windows. You're trying to, is because, look, have we seen 3-hour and 45-minute college football games or 4-hour and 10-minute game? Absolutely. And and then when you have the TV rights to these games, it's like, well, the beginning of this game is going to start on ESPN News because this one has gone long, or this one is in overtime.
Over and over, man.
A lot. And you can't ultimately control that. But like, tell me the last time you were watching on a Sunday and the noon game was still going at 3:30. It doesn't exist.
Rarely, yeah.
I mean, sometimes it ends at like 2:50, and so you got a little pregame time before the 3 o'clock.
Yeah, you get like that bonus coverage from another game somewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so part of that is this, trying to figure out, just subtle ways to kind of, keep it tighter from a TV window standpoint. But the ultimate reason that I think you're going to hear, whether this is true or not, is that they're about to expand the playoffs. Okay. We know this is coming, 12-team playoff starting not this season, but next season. So the 24 season will have the 12-team playoff. They have determined by this subtle rule change, they can trim about 7 to 10 snaps a game on average off. And so when you think about it, when you get into a scenario, because there's going to be teams that are playing a lot of extra games in these scenarios. So I think that they're just trying to suggest, the committee or whoever is ultimately in charge of this, if we trim off 7 to 10 snaps a game on average throughout the course of a season, they've played one less game. So like anybody that's claiming safety issues, we can at least say, we're keeping the window tighter. We're trying to limit these guys, to potential injuries and things like that. And so, right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't think this rule ultimately changes the game. I do think it serves a minor purpose. Some may go, this isn't really even going to be a drop in the bucket. I don't know, but they're trying. And
if what you said is true, dude, that's 120 snaps in a regular season.
I agree, which is the equivalent of a game-ish, a game plus. And so I think that again, they can point to that and it serves a purpose. So I think that is important to note.
You have any thoughts just as a fan? You like it, dislike it, neutral?
Well, it's the only, I believe it's the only, it's like, it's funny because college basketball is the only level of any basketball that you play where they play halves.
Right.
Everybody plays quarters. Okay, high school, pro, any pro level, even in middle school. I mean, it's like first quarter, second quarter, whatever.
And women are away from it now. Women's college
Correct.
basketball.
That's right. Yeah, they are also playing, first, second, third, and fourth quarter. And I believe college football is the only division at any level that the clock stops on a first down.
Gotcha.
And so I think that I'm okay with it. It may take a bit of getting used to. I did kind of like it just because you manage the game a bit differently. It'll be interesting to see kind of what. How the strategy changes a bit now that it doesn't stop when you're trying to make a drive late in the game, or how you save your timeouts. Things like that, because I think that is important to know.
Is this already being emphasized in practice or within their little?
Well, it just changed. This was. I think I saw this news last Friday morning.
Yeah,
and so I mean, Texas Tech and the bulk of the country's springs were done, and so I think though that coaches will study this summer and kind of get familiar with. Time management experts or even NFL folks, and just say, is there anything you do differently because of this?
Don't call Mike McCarthy. There's some guys been doing it that way for a while and still hadn't figured it out.
And if I'm Joey, I call Matt Rule. I mean, he just spent 2 or 3 years in the NFL, and tell me the whatever. I mean, just somebody that has experienced it, and the differences at the professional level when the clock's just running all the time. So, but there'll definitely be some studying, and I think the tweaks as to way you either call plays or you play defense or whatever, based on that the clock will not be stopping anymore after first downs.
I really think it makes it more difficult, which I don't have any problem with. As a fan, I don't generally have any problem with this whatsoever. I also typically, especially when you were a good football team, had no problem with like 4-hour 10-minute games. But it's those when you stink and you're beating Stephen F. Austin by 110 and it's a 4-hour 10-minute game that we don't like. But it will make it more difficult. I mean, the urgency, the intensity of those moments in a tight game down the stretch absolutely will be ramped up. So it's going to have to be something that is emphasized and drilled, I think, over and over when you get back around to fall camp and things like that. And I bet we see some huge blunders here or there. Hell, like I'm talking about in the National Football League, these guys are doing it every day. They're quote unquote professionals. And you see time management blunders all the time, particularly if you are, again, a Dallas Cowboys fan. Do pray for us. Okay. We're going to move on to another subject, make a hard left away from football. Let's get the hoops and back in the Big 12 Conference, because the grand innovator, Brett Yormark, has got another wild idea, and we're getting to it next on Locked On Texas Tech. Texas Tech, a part of your day, whenever, wherever, however you're making it happen. We appreciate it. With Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan, coming at you from west of the 100th meridian, where it's really going down. And Chris, as we've had a lot of football on our minds this week, we're going to wrap up this episode with a basketball conversation, because there continues to be really interesting things happening on Brett Yormark's watch within the Big 12 Conference. And this actually is really interesting to me as a Tech fan as well, given some scheduling news we've had of late and our most recent scheduling experience a season ago, which was until the Big 12 Conference started. So set this up for me if you don't mind, because we're talking possibly being thrown around like a beach ball. We're just spitballing it right now, but possibly Big 12 meetings, Big 12 games within non-conference season that are not going to count as league games. I feel like that's like the legs of this table, but what's on top of the table here, Chris? Give me some more context into what kind of sounds like a wild idea, but I got to tell you, given how good this league is, how entertaining this league is, I'm interested. He's got my attention with this one.
You said Big 12 meetings a second ago, which you meant, as you I think you said, and then you said games. But ironically enough, next week there will actually be Big 12 meetings where they're going to decide a lot of these things. They're going to decide, future championship sites and structure on basketball scheduling and just all kinds of conference business. maybe even realignment discussion and possible additions on how to proceed there. Anyway, I think part of what is going to be discussed is the basketball format and schedule. So as we all know, there is no more Big 12 SEC challenge going forward. You know, your game in Baton Rouge, Louisiana this past year was the last one of those that you'll play. And so that is everybody's non-conference schedule takes a bit of a hit. And so with that, your RPI potentially takes a hit, or your net ranking takes a hit. So what the Big 12 is discussing, talking about doing, and I don't know if this is 1 year or big picture scenario, because I've been fascinated with whether it's a 14-team league or a 12-team league, how often are you playing people? Who are you partnered with? How is that set up? Because you're not doing the round robin anymore. One of the things that they have discussed, and I think with no Big 12 SEC challenge in mind, let's have some of these games against conference opponents. If we've determined that, hey, here's your conference schedule, you're only going to play Baylor, for example, one time, you know, in a regular conference schedule. Let's give everybody an extra game at the front end of the schedule in early November, and so we won't count it against the conference standings. But it benefits RPI. Fans like it. Net ranking, you know, is ultimately going to survive. It kind of takes the place of an SEC game. And so I think that there's a lot of discussion about beefing this thing up in early November. I just am telling you, I think that they're going to be very outside the box a bit with some of this basketball scheduling stuff, because I think that Yormark and the folks that are going to work on basketball in general, specifically men's, are going to try to own this space. They want to really play to the best basketball league in the country, brand that they've kind of built, if you will. And I don't know what all they'll ultimately come up with and what will be nailed down, but these are. I mean, I think this has a very real possibility of happening. This minor scheduling tweak, and so I mean, because who doesn't want to see a meaningful game early in the season? You know, against any of the conference opponents. It doesn't matter who it is. It's going to matter. It's going to mean something, and all those things. And if you were only going to see them one time in the regular conference schedule, I mean, what's the harm? You know, I mean, I think it's better than Grambling or Prairie View A&M or Mexico State or whatever it may be.
What about I had heard something about like in a tournament setting, like one of the early season tournaments could be some type of Big 12 gathering, or do you think this is more on campus possibly?
I think these are. Like, in other words, let's just go with the Baylor example. If you were set to play Baylor in Waco in the conference schedule once they put that together, and I can tell you they've got to get that to TV partners by July the 15th. So we've got a ways to go here.
Gotcha, yeah.
Hence the reason that meetings in early May, you start to talk about different things and set some things up and agree and disagree and all that, and start to get some things done there on what it's going to look like. But if you're set to play in Waco just the one time, and that's the only time you were going to see Baylor, it stands to reason that if they wanted to put a Tech Baylor game together, it would be in Lubbock,
Gotcha.
Just kind of a true home and home, even though only one of those would count toward the conference standings.
Yeah.
And again, that's just a hypothetical. It could be.
I'd rather have that, I think, honestly, as a fan, like any home schedule improvement that you could get. I guess I'd prefer it. Not that I'd be mad at some like neutral site, tournament setting or whatever, but give me some beef on the home schedule, because that's one thing that's really seemingly kind of drugged behind.
And for Texas Tech this year, the St. John's series was canceled. So you are, Rick Pitino gets that job, and then shortly after they bail out of that game in Madison Square Garden. And I think so now right now you've got your games in Atlantis, and you've got your game at Butler and Hinkle Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. And I think in late November, that's really the only meaningful games you have from a non-conference standpoint. So if you could get another quote unquote conference game that was a non-conference game. Now you've got like 5 legitimate non-conference games that I think helps your overall, RPI net ranking. And that's always the goal. You always want to have about 5. Some teams have 8, some teams have 4, but 5 has always been Texas Tech's sweet spot, and that's why you have the MTE. You go to the Bahamas or you go to Maui or whatever, you're going to get 3 games there. And then you have the SEC game, you have the Big East game. There's your 5, but right now you're short on that end. So I think this would definitely benefit you, which is the whole point. You want to try to benefit your non-conference schedule for sure.
What if all this time the Atlantis that the homie Plato was talking about was just a resort where they played college basketball games once upon a time, and we think it's some lost civilization? That's probably another episode where we'll investigate that, but it's possible.
In a ballroom, no less.
In a ballroom. Before we leave, Chris, I do hear about one other maybe scheduling bump on the horizon. And this is interesting to me because of the involvement of Fox Sports with Big Ten and Big 12 basketball. Is there some Big 10, Big 12 thing maybe around the corner, like 24 or 25 and beyond? Is that a conversation?
I think that there have been it's not going to happen this year. I think it's too early. But I think what has happened is that the SEC and the ACC are going to have a scheduling agreement and a kind of a challenge, if you will, starting in the next year or two. And I think there have been conversations with the Big 10 and the Big 12 about doing something similar. And so basically, I think it would essentially kind of take the place of what you were doing with the SEC. The question becomes is when, how is it executed? Because like the Big East and Big 12 deal is completely different than the SEC one. The SEC one was unique because it was always in January, always on one day. They kind of took over ESPN and ESPN family of channels there on that one day. And it was in the middle of your conference season. The Big East and the Big 12 one, it's spread out over a week and a half or 2 weeks, just kind of in late November into a couple of weeks into December. And it's just these games are home and home, and there's no rhyme or reason to when it is per se, other than just this window. And so how would the Big 10, Big 12 one look? Not real sure. When would they do it? How quickly would they do it? But I believe 24 would be the earliest you would see something like that. But I'm all for it. And I think Brett Yormark will try to push for that. Yes.
And the Fox involvement is just because they hold rights to both leagues. And there's been some thought that Fox is like trying to make a bigger, maybe basketball splash than they have previously. So
and
maybe
guess
trying
what?
to pair something up.
Guess what? You're not going to probably do a scheduling agreement with the Pac-12. Can't imagine why that would be, but probably some hurt feelings there.
Ion and CW's involvement as well. We do need to consider that. All right, we do need to get, because Buffy's coming on, and I know we've both got a recording on the CW set for that. So this episode must come to an end. Thank you so much for joining us once again on Locked On Texas Tech. And for those everydayers out there, join us again tomorrow. As I mentioned, we'll be processing whatever is going to go down with Tyree Wilson in the NFL draft tonight, and we'll get to what's next, to quote Joey McGuire, as it relates to draftable Red Raiders within the next calendar. That's coming up tomorrow as we wrap up the week. Chris, thanks for the time as always, man. Enjoyed it.
Guns up. Keep hope alive, everybody.
He's Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. We'll see you for the next one to wrap up the week tomorrow on Locked On Texas Tech.